So a big thank you to all of you who could make it to our annual event today. I'm Tanvi Rao. I'm a final year Ph.D. candidate in the Applied Economics department here at Cornell, and I'm also a TCI scholar. So I'd like to share with you a piece of work that Professor Prabhu and I have been working on for some time now. And essentially, the paper that we're working on looks at the association between nutritional status and agricultural production at the household level. And in doing so, we essentially use a very detailed panel data set that follows the same households over a period of 5 years. And these households live in villages that are part of sort of the drier region in the country, and most of the households sort of use agriculture as their main source of livelihood. So why is it important to study this relationship between nutrition and agricultural production at the household level? The main reason is that the nutritional implications of agricultural production are often used to motivate large investments into improving agricultural productivity. But at the same time, we know, or sort of we have very little non-programmatic empirical evidence on really what happens to nutrition at the household level when there's a marginal increase in agricultural production. So in particular, we actually expect women's nutritional status to be impacted by agricultural production. The reason for this is that women work in the agriculture sector much more than they work in any other sector of the economy. But the effect of agriculture production on nutritional status can go either way. So on the one hand, if you increase agricultural productivity, it might mean more money in the hands of women, which could imply more bargaining power and more decision making in the way resources are allocated within the household in terms of allocating food, health, and care. But at the same time, more agricultural output could mean more work, so more physical work in agriculture, so more exposure to agricultural diseases, but also sort of just more energy expenditure. So we don't really know where and sort of in what direction the effect could go, or what could be the overall magnitude of increasing agricultural productivity on nutritional status of the household. And up till now, the lack of suitable data has really impeded progress. And the reason for this is that nutrition and health data sets don't have detailed agriculture data, and agricultural data sets don't have detailed nutrition and health data. And we're able to use here a unique data set that uniquely combines both these elements and has allowed us to make some progress. So we measure nutritional status at the household level using Women's Body Mass Index, or BMI, as an indicator. The reason for this basically stems from a primary concern that Indian women are at particular risk of being underweight or of having BMI of less than 18.5. So just in our sample, 33% of women between the age group of 15 to 49 years, which is essentially considered to be the age range of women of childbearing age, are underweight. This number is worryingly high, but it's actually even higher for younger women. So women between 15 to 25 years, among whom fertility is largely concentrated, have an even higher incidence of underweight, and it's higher by around another 13 percentage points. So these numbers are really worryingly high across the country and also in our sample. So the data we use was collected by ICRISAT and is part of their Village Dynamics in South Asia program. We use data on about 900 households that are drawn from 18 villages across 5 Indian states, and those are the ones that are circled here. And most of these villages are towards the west and the south. We don't use data on the eastern villages because they didn't have the complete data that we needed. So I'm going to spare all of you the details of the econometrics, but essentially what we end up doing is that we estimate an elasticity of BMI to agricultural output. Okay, and our econometric model basically compares the same woman in years of high agricultural productivity versus low agricultural production. And in doing so, we avoid using variation across women, which makes it much harder to control for confounding effects. Okay, and we estimate both a short-term and a long-term specification of our model. The short-term specification looks at the association on a year-to-year basis, and the long-term specification smooths out these sort of year-to-year fluctuations to to arrive at a more stable relationship. And both models yield an economically modest but statistically significant relationship between agricultural output at the household level and a maternal BMI. And these effects we find are much larger for younger women who are at a much higher risk of being underweight. And even though the effects themselves are economically modest, they're important to note because we don't find an analogous growth or sort of a corresponding increase in the growth of non-agricultural income on the growth of BMI. We also look at the pathways through which this increase in agricultural output might be operating. So essentially, food that's consumed at the household can either be produced at home or it could be purchased. So we formally test for whether food produced at home significantly impacts women's BMI. And this is a plausible hypothesis in sort of cases where markets are weak and where we'd expect high transaction costs. We don't find, in our case, own production to be significantly associated with women's BMI, and we show in a symmetric regression that essentially food purchases are significantly correlated with women's BMI. This is especially true for pulses. So at least in our case, it seems to be that this effect of increasing agricultural output seems to be operating through an income effect, that is households having more income at their disposal to purchase more nutritious foods. So the main takeaway is that our results indicate that investments in agricultural productivity can be leveraged to address women's malnutrition in rural areas, but we need more detailed household level data to further understand mechanisms. So some of the questions that we could look at asking in the near future is that, do increases in ag income imply more money in the hands of women? This is sort of an assumption that's embedded at the back of our paper, but and also whether with more money in hand, do women allocate expenses towards more nutritious purchases? So that's it, thanks.